Welcome to Inside the Indians, your source for insider information on the Tribe. Stay with us as we bring you the latest about the players, managers, and people behind the scenes at Victory Field. Now here's your host, the longtime broadcast voice of the Indians, Howard Kellman.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Inside the Indians. On today's show, we'll speak with the manager of the Tribe, Bryan Esposito, Indianapolis Indians pitching coach Bryan Hickerson, and relief pitcher Montana DuRapau. We'll be back with Espo on the home of the Indians, WHMB TV 40. Esposito, the skipper of the Indianapolis Indians, our first guest on Inside the Indians. Espo, you work so hard with these guys before games, and that's a big thing. Tell us about some of the work you do with players.
Well, you know, all these players that are here, we talk about developing and getting them ready for the big leagues. You know, they all have some type of performance plan, some type of priority that they need to get done in order for them to get to the next level. So we just try to work as tirelessly as we can. The staff does a great job as well of identifying what each individual player needs and then how they take those skills and apply it to the game, you know, in a team concept. So there's a lot of individual work. There's a lot of identifying what has happened in, you know, the past games that we could work towards on any given basis. So there are guys that have specific things they need to work on, and then there are things that show up in the game that we need to make sure that we address so that it doesn't, you know, pose a problem moving forward. So the game is going to tell you something every night, and then we just counteract what the game's telling us by advancing it forward.
I think one of the things you do so well is you hold players accountable, and that means everything.
Yeah. You know, in this day and age, there's a lot of guys that just want to go out there and just play their game and do what they need to do. But, you know, accountability, in my opinion, leads to a lot of ownership. When you start holding guys accountable for them, it teaches them that that there's a level of ownership on their end to make sure that they understand who they are as a player. They understand what it is that they need to get better at, and then they also hold themselves accountable and have a level of ownership for how they're going to get it done. You know, I could sit around this clubhouse all day long and tell guys what it is they need to do and how they need to get better at it. But unless it's their idea, unless it's something that really drives them to want to go out and do it, then you know, no one likes to be told what to do and go out and do it. Then they feel like they're not doing it for anything other than just punishment. Accountability and ownership allows them to realize that it's something that needs to be done for them and for their careers moving forward.
I think some players too will react and say, "This guy really cares about me."
Sometimes I think there are certain individuals that are in different spots in their career where they'll view it as, you know, maybe that I'm riding him a little bit, or I don't like what he's doing, or we need to make sure that, you know, just continue to do things because that's what I want to get done. Then there's always some that understand that my best interest is in their careers and what they need to do moving forward to allow them to have the careers that they want. Sometimes that lands on different clocks, on different people's watches. It might be something where a player 2, 3 years, 4, 5, 6 years down the road might realize that, okay, now I understand what he was doing and why he was doing it. Some guys get it immediately. Some guys, it takes time.
One guy I think you've helped recently is Eric Gonzalez, who's new to the ball club.
Yeah, you know, he's a really talented player. You know, he's a really good defender. He's got some length to him, which, I mean, makes him outstanding in terms of covering ground and some range. We just identified that when he moves to the right side of the infield and he plays second base, you know, he took it for granted that it would be a lot easier because he's closer to first base, so the throw's shorter, and his movements didn't have to be as athletic in order to make plays. So we just looked at some video and we talked a little bit about, you know, we need to make sure that we're the best possible defender on the field at all times. So our setup is just as important whether I'm on the right side of the field or the left side of the field, and how I attack the attack, how I attack the balls, and how I want to get my feet moving matters. So we made some adjustments. We ran a variety of drills out there, and he seems to be in a really good spot in understanding that, man, I need to be on time and ready no matter where I'm playing on the field to be an effective defender.
There's a change since you spoke with him because his body language is much better just watching him.
Yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, just bringing something to a player's awareness is all it needs. You know, it's not always going to be a knockdown, drag-out argument or a challenge to a player. Sometimes it's just awareness. And I think when you make them aware, we touched on some accountability earlier, when you just make them aware, they have a level of accountability to make sure that they do something with the awareness.
We've had some good performances from some young players, and let's start with Bryan Hayes. Tell us your thoughts on him.
Yeah, he was a missed player while he was down with the injury. He's come back and he's ready to play some hardball. The defense continues to be good. The bat is starting to come around. While he had some time to be down, I think he kind of reflected a little bit on what he was trying to do and how he was trying to get it done. And the time off sometimes will give you an opportunity to really focus on the smaller intricacies. What do I do well? Where are these guys pitching me? What can I do differently when I do come back? And how am I going to attack that? And he's definitely used his time down to his advantage.
See, that's a great point, and I've had other players say that over the years. A regular player like him, someone who's playing every day, when you take a step back for a few weeks, it gives you a whole different perspective.
Yeah, when you get taken out of the fire for a little bit, you can look at some things differently. There's nothing more that he wanted to do to get back on the field and continue to play. But when you get something taken away from you and you have some time to look back and say, okay, what can I do differently to get better? The good ones usually use that time in the right manner, and he did.
Cole Tucker's had a good season too. Tell us about Cole.
Yeah, coming into the season, we expected him to go to play shortstop here in AAA. Nobody really factored him to go to the big leagues as early as he did, but he got an opportunity to go up there, and he did some pretty good things. Had some pretty good at-bats in the big leagues. With a homer in the first game, he played a really good shortstop in the big leagues. But the time came for him to come back down here and really try to advance his offensive weaponry. And that would be, just some movements at the plate that put him in an optimal hitting position to get some more strength and not so much swing and miss and chase. To put up some professional bats and be a professional hitter, there's a level of some rhythm and timing and some separation, which he's worked on, and he's done a really good job with it. His bunt game's coming around. He's focusing on using that as a weapon, and his defense has been really good. So another guy that made the most of his big league opportunity to take what the game presented to him at that highest level, and his experience has allowed him to come back down here and really hone in on what he needs to do to get better to stay the next time he goes up.
And how about Will Craig?
Will Craig's a work in progress. Will Craig is at a different spectrum than a guy like Cole Tucker in the fact that he has not experienced the highest level yet. So the successes that he had down here, he kind of got pitched a little bit differently once he put up some of the bigger numbers, and the game is telling him something. And he's in that situation right now where he's responding to what the game is telling him. Sometimes it's harder for other players to make those initial adjustments. Sometimes it's hard to understand what I really need to do to mature myself to become a major league hitter, and he's going through those learning curves right now, where he thinks about just trying to swing his way through it. A lot of times it's about putting yourself in a better position just to see the ball, and let me take a look at what pitches I'm swinging at, and a lot of it will be he's going outside the zone and trying to hit everything as opposed to what he hits well. So he's going through that learning curve right now. He didn't have the experience at the major league level. So it's hard to coach experience when it's not there. So he's going through that little turbulence of a situation right now.
Well said, Espo. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That's Bryan Esposito on the home of the Indians, WHMB TV 40. Bryan Hickerson, the Indianapolis Indians pitching coach, our next guest on Inside the Indians. Bryan, let's start with Mitch Keller. He's had a good season. Give us your overall thoughts, your impressions, having watched him all year.
Well, overall, he's still, obviously adjusting to this level, coming into it last year and making some adjustments there, but then also getting a taste of the big leagues and coming back from that probably with a wider or a broader understanding of what he needs to do to get even better. And he's the type of kid that pursues that and continues to do that. So I think he's still, with a new pitch to slider this year that he didn't have last year, and learning how to utilize all four of those pitches, given the hitter, given the situation, as he evolves this year, I think that's where he's at, and he's doing a great job at that.
Yes, and you mentioned the slider, adding that, and that puts another reasonable doubt in a batter's mind.
Absolutely, and it's a really good pitch. It's not his fourth best pitch. A lot of people would think since it's his newest one, it's his fourth best. It's actually one of his better pitches, and so it's just a really great addition to his weaponry, and it does. Hitters don't like it.
He has a good slow curveball too. Now, some guys, and he will be one, throwing both a curve and a slider. A lot of other pitchers only throw one or the other.
Sure, he has the ability to do both, and you know, the speed differential on his curveball and the break differential gives the hitter a whole nother a view of the ball versus a slider, a lot harder, a lot shorter, closer to his fastball. Both of them move quite a bit, so you know, it just makes it tougher for hitters to defend greater parts of the zone given those parameters.
I know a lot of guys have told me over the years, hitters have said, the fastball curveball change can be really difficult. Now, as you mentioned, Mitch has both a curve and a slider, because you're really messing with a hitter's timing, fastball to curveball.
Sure, but the curveball also comes probably earlier detection by the hitter because of the bigger break and all that. And so with that combination of recognition and speed differential might minimize the effectiveness unless you're executing location with both the fastball and curveball at the same time. So that's the tricky part about pitching, is you can have these, but hitter recognition comes into play. And of course, the higher level you get to, the better they are at that. And the more they've seen, the more experienced they are. And so you have to be good with those.
Pitcher's enemy is a hanging breaking ball.
Yep.
You know, whether it's a curve or a slider. What causes a breaking ball to hang as opposed to one where you have it down around the knees where you'd like it?
Well, a couple of things. One of them can be purely a mental thing. A lot of guys will try to make their curveball better than it has to be. And what happens physically when you mentally do that is you usually get behind the pitch, under it, instead of getting it out front and on top of it, and that leaves it up because your upper body will fly open a little sooner because you're trying to be more aggressive than you have to be. So the mental approach can affect the physical execution. The other part is just physical. It can be a hanging breaking ball. You just physically didn't release at the right point. You might not have been in rhythm, lower half to upper half in your pitching delivery, and so those two things are the most common.
And what happens when a breaking ball is in the dirt and you didn't intend it to be that way?
Well, a lot of times the guys they're trying to make it really good, and we call it yanking it. They get it way too out front and way too on top, and it's too low out of the hand, and the hitter knows that as soon as they see the spin that it's going to be in the dirt. But if you've been throwing a curveball in the strike zone, in the lower part of the strike zone for a strike, then you throw one just a little bit below that, that's when you start getting the swings, the swing and misses, and all that stuff.
See, that's a good point, because if you go a little lower than low, if a guy's a low ball hitter, you go lower than low, you may get him.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. What about pitching inside? Tell us about that and the philosophy behind it.
Well, the overall philosophy is, if we break the strike zone up into 9 cubes, you know, you have low, medium, and high, low, middle, high. Then you have inside, middle, outside, and you have front, middle, back. So you have really 27, what I call cubes of the strike zone. The more of those a pitcher can cause a hitter to defend with the bat, the more effective he's going to be. And so pitching inside gives the hitter the I can't let the inside pitch go. Okay. Now, if he only pitches inside, then the hitter only has to defend the inside. But a lot of times, if they have to defend the inside and you're executing outside, now you have the whole width. And then you change speeds, you have the 3 depths besides. And so if a hitter can eliminate one side of the plate, you've given him just a much greater chance to connect than otherwise.
That's so important, because if you pitch inside, then there's that thought in that hitter's mind, wow, he just not only inside, but inside over the inside corner for strikes as well. So it's two things. It's pitching inside for strikes, sure, and coming in, you've put a thought where a hitter's not going to be so comfortable leaning over the plate.
Well, yeah, that's the other part about it. You can pitch in for effect, which we call it. You can pitch in for not confrontation, but to say, we call it moving feet, or moving part of the body, so that they just can't sit in there with a firm stance and take the big, like, home run swings all the time. If you allow them to do that, you're giving them a greater chance to hit you hard.
Was there anybody, when you got time in the big leagues as a pitcher, anybody really helped you along the way?
When I was growing up, going through professional baseball and getting to the big leagues, it was mostly colleagues. It was us pitchers sitting around and talking about it, whether in the bullpen or on the bench or when we travel. There was more of that than anything else. Was just that's what we talked about, was what do you do, or how do you do that, or what do you see here? And so that's where most of the learning happened.
There's much more instruction now, and there are more instructors and coordinators than there used to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the access to video. We had video then, but it was, the VHS stuff, a lot harder to work with and everything. But most of that was, and then the other thing that's most valuable, I think, is your own personal history against hitters. And you remembering what you did against them, what they did against you, because nobody throws just like you, nobody looks just like you, nobody's ball looks just like yours out of the hand. And so personal experience is a huge thing for pitchers to really think about and learn from.
Very well said. Bryan, thank you so much. That's Bryan Hickerson, the Indianapolis Indians pitching coach, and this is the home of the Indians, WHMB TV Sports. Indianapolis Indians pitcher Montana DuRapau, our next guest on Inside the Indians. Montana, you've had a really good year starting here, going to the big leagues. Tell us first about your experience about going to the major leagues.
I've been asked that question more times than I can count now, and the answer is always kind of the same. It's hard to put into words exactly what it's like up there, other than it's the coolest thing I could ever dream of doing, and it was a blast to go.
Do you notice, and of course the stage is bigger, the attention, you go from AA to AAA. It's a big jump too, AAA to the big leagues. Is it a bigger jump, AAA to the big leagues, than AA to AAA?
Definitely, because I mean, when you're talking about big league hitters, you're facing the best guy from each AAA team for the most part, and that's stacked up full lineup. And when you're facing, you see guys get hot in AAA, but when you see guys get hot in the big leagues, it's different kind of. When you're just watching BP in the big leagues, it's a completely different experience.
You have to be careful too. You have a lot of good hitters, but you can do your thing too, is not to give the hitters too much credit.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm not trying to give anybody extra credit, but it's just like that you need to be at the top of your game always. You can't. I mean, exactly. You definitely. These aren't the kind of hitters you can give any room, because if you give them an inch, they're going to destroy you.
And when we talk about you as a pitcher, you've got a nice arsenal, different pitchers, and you also have deception, and that's important.
For sure, yeah. And what it comes down to is execution up there, because they're not going to let you get away with two mistakes. You know what I mean? They rarely let you get away with one mistake, but you definitely have to be dialed in.
Whether you're here or up there, tell us about your philosophy of pitching and your approach that you take.
Well, before, I had a pretty broad approach before I had made it to the big leagues, which was I'm going to throw everything that I have, and I'm going to throw it for strikes and challenge guys. When I went up to the big leagues and I struggled a little bit, when I came back, my philosophy changed, not in the sense of what I was doing, but how I was visualizing hitters. And it was like, I thought about the best left-handed hitter I faced when I was in the big leagues. I thought about the best right-handed hitter when I was in the big leagues. And I attacked. When I came back to AAA, I was, envisioning facing those guys when I see a lefty or when I see a righty. And it's just kind of like helped me dial up how locked in I can be.
You want to make good pitches, but you have to be careful, too, to say, this is going to be the best slider or best fastball I've ever thrown, as opposed to, okay, I've got to execute that pitch.
Yeah, you never want to throw your best pitch. You know what I mean? You want each pitch to be your best pitch, because when you start to say, I'm going to make this one nasty, is when you throw the worst one of the day. So that's definitely not the mindset you want to have when you're trying to execute a pitch. You just want to know, I'm trusting what I have. I'm not trying to make it do anything different. I'm trusting what I see every day. I'm going to throw that.
I think that's what sets baseball apart from other sports, and that the biggest mistake you can make is try too hard.
Exactly, yeah, definitely.
Tell us a story about you signing a professional contract and coming to the Pirates.
I was sitting outside on the porch with my mom and my dad, and we were listening to the draft. And for whatever reason, I thought I'd done pretty well in college. I thought I was going to get drafted a lot higher. So, as those, 11 through 40 rounds, they take, you know what I mean? They're rattling them off. And, you know, we're sitting there and round after round goes by, don't hear my name, don't hear my name, don't hear my name, don't hear my name. And eventually, you know, we start playing cards, we're sitting on the back, and it was like 32nd round, the Pirates select Montana DuRapau, and I heard my mom scream so loud, we had to call the neighbors and let them know that everything was fine. And it was just a good experience. It was great.
And then one of the first things I asked you when I met you was, how did you get the nickname the name Montana? Tell us the story behind that.
It's actually not a crazy story. My mom was actually reading a book, and it took place in Montana when I was conceived, and they liked it, so they just went with it.
So it had nothing to do with any love for the state of Montana. It was the book your mom was reading.
I don't think anyone in my family's ever been to Montana.
Do you get a lot of people asking you that question too,
A lot,
about
yeah.
your name?
Yeah.
Well, Montana, it's been a really good season for you. Any final thoughts as you look at the last month of the season, what you're trying to do?
I'm just trying to finish as strong as I can and hopefully get a chance to go help the guys in Pittsburgh.
Well, we hope so. We congratulate you on what you've achieved, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Montana DuRapau, Indianapolis Indians relief pitcher. And this is the home of the Indians, WHMB, TV 40. We'd like to thank our guests, Bryan Esposito, Bryan Hickerson, and Montana DuRapau. See you next week on Inside the Indians.